sports, many of us sort of wait all year for these kinds of things. The Orioles in the middle of a pennant race headed out to Detroit to take on the upstart Detroit Tigers, and the Ravens will finally play non-fake football on Sunday. The Buffalo Bills coming to town. Luke Jones has been on the scene out in Owings Mills all week long for the action, and, all the talking stops now, Luke. They're going to play football on Sunday.
They really are, and we've talked so much throughout the offseason. You had a lost 2015 season, a 5-11 campaign. We started talking about next year back in November last year. So you finally have an opportunity to see what this team's going to look like. And even as someone who's been out there every day during training camp and trying to get a look at the new players on this team, the Ronnie Stanleys, the Kamale Correas, Matt Judon, Chris Moore, looking at injury, players coming back from injuries like Terrell Suggs, like Steve Smith. I still have a real tough time trying to figure out what to make of this football team. I think they're going to be better than they were last year, but there's still so much unknown. And even Mark Trestman, talking on Thursday to the media, acknowledged that because they had so many guys in and out of practice because of injury, guys coming back from injuries last year, guys like Dennis Pitta, who got hurt and missed most of training camp, in the case of Pitta, a broken finger, never really had the entire group together for any meaningful amount of time. So I think there's still a little bit of a science experiment feel to how both sides of the football are going to feel. And you just have a lot of older players that the Ravens are counting on, and that needs to be coupled with younger players taking a step forward. But Sunday, first opportunity to really see where this team is, and the Buffalo Bills will give them a pretty good idea of where they stand, at least to begin the 2016 season.
The worst part for Pease and for Trestman and these mad scientists, as much as the fans are like, hey, we need to get Suggs out there, we need to get Steve Smith out there, everything they want to do that they dream up in the offseason involves a full complement of players, a healthy Brashad Perryman, a healthy Elvis Dumerville. And there's certainly still some parts of this on Sunday that are going to be very, very incomplete. And I think all eyes will be on Suggs and on Steve Smith and on Flacco and on anybody who wasn't healthy last year to say, how's Steve Smith aging? How's Terrell Suggs aging? Can they still do this? I think that's a question for a lot of plus 30 players in the league the first couple of weeks.
Well, it has to be. This is a young man's game, and I don't mean that as a slight to Steve Smith or Suggs or anyone you want to name. This team has a number of older players on its roster. In fact, I saw a report that came out, I believe it was a report out of Philadelphia that kind of did a study of the average age of NFL rosters. And it was just based off the initial 53-man roster that, by the way, didn't include Justin Forsett or Devin Hester. And the Ravens were already one of the five, six oldest teams in the league. And then they added two more plus 30 guys to that 53-man roster. So, that's...
I don't think of them as a veteran team, by the way. I think of them as a young team, strangely enough.
I think of them as an older team, to be totally honest, because of how many older players, how many of their critical, very important players are.
I'm wondering how critical Suggs and Smith are. I'm not disparaging them. I know what their career's been, but I have not been one of those guys as a fan expecting a lot out of them this year. Now, maybe John feels differently, certainly the offense, the defense, the way they want to use them, but I am, until I see them come back and look like the name on the back of their jersey, for me, they have, and they know this, something to prove because of their age and because of their injuries.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. They're both going to start based on everything we've seen, everything we know. I think there's probably a little more wiggle room with Steve Smith because you do have Kamar Aiken, who played so well, and that's in a very similar role last year. Remember, he started running Steve's routes, plays that were kind of in place for him, and really thrived in that role. So you have some wiggle room there. You have Mike Wallace, you have Brashad Perriman, but they need Suggs to be close to the Suggs of old. Because I just don't see who's ready to take that role. I don't think we've seen enough from Zadarius Smith to think that he's suddenly going to become Terrell Suggs 2.0. And it's tough to ask anyone to be that, quite frankly. But remember, what was the major theme of the end-of-season press conference last year? It was, how much this defense missed Terrell Suggs? And, okay, that's fine to say that, but then, okay, you're counting on a guy who's going to be 34 next month, coming back from a second Achilles injury. and he's got to be that guy again.
And there's nothing there to replace him, right?
Yeah, you're going to have the same exact issues. And look, that's not to say I don't like Matt Judon or Zadarius Smith or Kamale Correa, but to think any of those individuals are just going to suddenly be a Pro Bowl caliber outside linebacker would be really unfair to them as well. So, I think of those two, to me, Suggs is far more critical. And I'm not just talking about Sunday, knowing that Elvis Dumerville's not going to be playing against Buffalo, but I think for the duration of the season, I don't need to see Terrell Suggs have 15, 16 sacks, but he better have at least 8, 9, 10 and continue to play that role of being so good against the run and just having that presence out there. If he can do that, which wouldn't necessarily mean he's a Pro Bowl player anymore, but at least puts him in line with where he was, say, in 2013, 2014, I suppose, then this defense probably will be, I would think will be better than it was last year. If not, and you have a diminished version of Suggs and let's say a slightly diminished version of Elvis Dumerville, and especially not knowing what the foot situation is going to be for him once he does get back, then the pass rush doesn't look good enough then. So I think of those two, and I think it's a valid position that you take on those two. I think Suggs is the more critical one. They still would certainly love to have Steve Smith at least close to what he was before. How realistic that is, we'll see how he looks when he gets on the field. I know he's looked good in practice, and I know they're excited about where he is physically. He said the other day he feels good after getting over some initial soreness that any player would have coming back to the football field. But, I think for the Ravens, they do have, you just look at it objectively. Right now their number one receiver, 37-year-old guy. Their two outside pass rushers, their edge pass rushers, both on the wrong side of 30. They've already lost Ben Watson for the year, who they were counting on to give them a little more of a boost at the tight end position. Dennis Pitta, 31 years old, coming back from the two catastrophic hip injuries. So, they do have a number of older players that they're counting on, and I'm guessing some of those older players aren't going to be what they were before, and that's where it becomes imperative. It becomes so critical. I'm not even just talking for this season, but for the future of the Baltimore Ravens. They need some of these younger players to pop. They need Brashad Perriman to be what they envisioned him to be when they drafted him last year. They need a Zadarius Smith or a Matt Judon look like they're ready to become a starting caliber player at some point in the next year, let's say. They need Ronnie Stanley to be the left tackle that he looks like he's looked like it in the summer, that he can be a franchise left tackle that'll make everyone forget about every left tackle the Ravens have had since Jonathan Ogden. But those guys have to do it, and there's a different speed to the game going from the preseason to the regular season, in the same way they say going from the regular season to the playoffs. That's another step, another jump that has to be made, and they need some of these younger guys beyond Brandon Williams. They need some of these younger guys to really step forward and become the next stars for the Ravens, because we don't know exactly what we're going to see from some of those other names we mentioned.
Luke Jones joining us here. He has been in Owings Mills all week, and of course the Buffalo Bills come in, and we've talked a lot about the purple part of their heart, right? From Rex Ryan and Dennis Thurman and Greg Roman to Tyrod Taylor to now Ed Reed is one of their coaches. If there's ever sort of a mirror program out there at this point, what Rex has taken to Buffalo is a little bit of the play like a Raven.
Yeah, another name they're throwing there, Corey Graham. Don't forget about him. I moved to safety last year, but has been a part of their secondary the last couple years. But this is a Buffalo team that I think if anyone looks at it objectively, they're undermanned, especially on defense, losing Lawson, losing Reggie Ragland. That's
Darius.
That's right. Darius suspended. A guy who a huge part of what they did defensively. This wasn't a great defense a year ago anyway, but that's tough. That's a really difficult situation to be in when you have that much loss that you've endured, and you haven't even played a regular season snap yet. We've talked about the Ravens a year ago. I guess at least Terrell Suggs got to the opener before he got hurt, and then the injuries piled up after that. But this is there's a lot of familiarity here. It's not as though the Ravens haven't changed at all since Rex Ryan left. He's been gone now for 8 years. It's been quite a while, but it's clear that there's still an imprint there. Terrell Suggs talked about that, and then on the flip side, what Rex wants to try to do defensively. I don't know if he has the horses to be able to carry it out, but I think it's very interesting as far as the storylines with familiarity. Whether it's Ed Reed telling that secondary some secrets about Joe Flacco that he picked up over the years in practice, or Tyrod Taylor. Maybe it's the Ravens knowing some of his weaknesses a little more intimately than other teams around the league. You can kind of go back and forth on this, and it almost becomes paralysis by analysis. But I think it's very much interesting, and I think one of the big things that come to mind for me is, what is that Buffalo defense going to try to do against Ronnie Stanley? And if we see Alex Lewis at left guard, and my gut tells me we're going to see him at left guard, and not to say that John Urschel is out of the plans, but he missed a lot of time in the summer. If you have two rookies starting on the left side, no matter how talented they are, no matter how they looked in the summer, a Rex Ryan defense is going to try to throw the kitchen sink at them in terms of stunts, in terms of pressures, trying to disguise what they're doing. So to me, that's going to be really interesting to see that, because, those two individuals protecting Joe Flacco's blind side. So, that's one of the big things that comes to mind. But, overall, as far as this Ravens team, I guess more so on the offensive side of the ball, because they have so much uncertainty, because they have so many new parts to that offensive puzzle, I think the big thing you just want to see is get into a rhythm. It's going to be interesting. There are going to be some growing pains as far as figuring out what's going to work exactly, but you got to be careful not to just be worried about getting everyone touches, whether you're talking the running backs, whether you're talking the wide receivers, or even the tight ends. Having two talented young tight ends on this roster, and having Dennis Pitta coming back, you got to be careful not to have too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. Got to find a rhythm, and I think this is a Buffalo defense that you can do some things against. There's no question about that, but I think try to keep it a little simpler than maybe trying to fully install everything you want to do as the season goes on. That's something I'll be looking for as well on Sunday.
Yeah, the quarterback and the right guard have some experience, but along the way, there's a lot of new parts there for the Ravens. Speaking of new parts, how about that inspired effort on Thursday night from Trevor Siemian, right? I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. Nobody knew what to expect from the Broncos. That kid held up pretty well. That's what you want to see from the names that you're unfamiliar with. You want to see some guys stand out.
Yeah, and let's face it, the Broncos didn't win because of Trevor Siemian. They won because their defense
But they didn't lose because of him.
Sure. He turned it over a couple times, but, he made some throws that he needed to. And, to be totally honest, if you had, just blurred over the numbers and all that, you wouldn't have been shocked if it was Peyton Manning, the way he played last year.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Just that's what he was. He was a guy who, last year, they asked him not to lose the game. Same with Osweiler. So it was definitely a nice effort from that Denver defense. I will say this, just as an aside, I don't know how the NFL doesn't look into the fact that Cam Newton took 4 or 5 different blows to the head. I believe only one was penalized, and then on top of that, I didn't see anyone screening him for a concussion. There are a couple of those hits where he got up so slow. As much as they want to preach safety and all of that, I really have to scratch my head how that was handled. One, how they can repeatedly hit him in the head. If that happened to Joe Flacco, Ravens fans would be up in arms. Any team's fans would be up in arms about their quarterback, and I didn't see them screen him at all for a potential concussion. I get it, late in the game, it's close, but
someone tweeted he's a top 5 player. He doesn't get a concussion.
And therein lies the problem as far as if we're trying to be consistent with all this stuff, and that's why the NFL is dealing with lawsuits and so many people.
Didn't take long, did it? Just the first game to their most famous player, right?
Yeah, but that ran aside, which I'll stand by that. Pretty good football game for the season opener. Wasn't I don't know if it was a thriller, but it was certainly a close game.
Well, it was definitely a rematch. There was definitely some bad blood there, and some, something to prove, and all of that. And certainly, Peyton coming out there holding the trophy. It was exciting. It was an exciting night.
It was cool. I liked hearing Peyton in the booth as well. I
think
if he wants to, he can absolutely be the next Phil Simms, the next Chris Collinsworth.
And I would love to see him pop off at the mouth and not have any sort of thing restraining him, because I have a feeling he can be pretty funny and pretty biting, quite frankly.
Yeah.
He doesn't need a script to be funny, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think he's I don't think he's someone who has an axe to grind with anyone. I think he'd be pretty diplomatic in that regard. But as far as what he sees on the field, I think he'll tell you like it is. And you're right, the comedic timing, and it was such a corny joke at the end. But I still like how Al Michaels got him to say Omaha. I thought that was good.
He got him to say. You know, when I think of Peyton Manning, I think of like how good Jim Palmer is when Jim Palmer's good. On the broadcast, you know?
I mean, I am unabashed as far as being a Peyton Manning guy ever since the point that I guess he did that SNL hosting gig about 10
for me, it was the bread commercials. You know, it was the bread line and the chicken parm. You taste so good.
Yeah. I mean, the latest one, the Peyton on a Sunday morning commercials, which are already starting to get overplayed.
Woo!
I admit it, but I
love Lionel Richie, but that's got to go away, man. That's too much. Luke Jones is here, and speaking of going away, the Orioles stay away all weekend. They will be back next weekend. Now, the offensive lineman of the 0-1 Ravens had a term, it's nut cut time. Well, it's nut cut time here for the Orioles, and certainly going to Detroit, going to Boston, looking at the pitching matchups. It never looks good when you look at the pitching matchups, but somehow, some way, they seem to win 2 out of 3 pretty often enough, but rarely on the road. This is a time for them to step up here in Detroit.
It really is. I mean, it's well and good to take 2 out of 3 from the Tampa Bay Rays, who, by the way, have given some other teams some tough times here over the last couple of weeks.
They're going to see him again next week, too, by the way.
Yeah. But, this is a huge series. It's stating the obvious. I mean, they have a 1-game lead over Detroit entering the weekend. You need to take 2 out of 3. You are keeping an eye on what's happening as far as Boston taking on Toronto this weekend, so you have a chance to gain ground on one of those teams, but the other team's going to win. So, you're in a position where you can't be losing 2 out of 3. You certainly can't be getting swept. You look at the pitching matchups, you're going to be seeing Fulmer, who's been terrific, Jordan Zimmerman, who certainly has had his share of issues this year, and Justin Verlander, who's been really, really good. Chris Tillman, barring anything weird happening at the start of the weekend, should see him on Sunday. Jimenez goes Saturday. Kevin Gausman goes in the opener. So
hey, at least they don't see Porcello and Scherzer this time, right?
Yeah, right. Although you might want to, based on how that history went. But
we'll see Porcello later in the week.
Yeah. But this is a huge series. I mean, and we talked about it. I mean, this team has struggled to win on the road all year. This is put up or shut up time. I mean, you have to do it at some point. Whether it's now or whether it's the final week of the season when they're going to finish up with 2 series on the road, including 1 in Toronto. So, you might as well take 2 out of 3, grow your lead in the wild card, and take 2 out of 3 and come up for air at the end of the weekend and see where you stand as it relates to Toronto and Boston. But this is a critical series, and the good news, Chris Tillman coming back, Darren O'Day appears to be on the precipice of returning as early as next week, it sounds like. So you're getting getting healthier. Chris Davis dealing with that palm issue that forced him out of Wednesday's game, but that's something I know he's dealt with all year. I don't think it's necessarily something that's getting worse, but it's just something he's dealt with.
Yeah, I was concerned about Scope after the pitch on the wrist the other night.
Yeah.
Looks like it's okay for now, right?
Yeah, I think he's okay. I mean, probably a bruise, but certainly didn't leave the game or anything like that. So I mean, they're as healthy. They're getting to the point. If you get Tillman and O'Day back here over the next several days, they're as healthy as they can reasonably be at this time in the year. Time to go. Time to win some ball games. Time to win some games on the road, and see where the chips fall at the end of the month. But certainly a huge opportunity going to Detroit. Not going to be easy. And keep in mind they had that series where they should have had a 4-game sweep. If you remember, it was the final day where they got to O'Day in the 8th inning that Sunday in May. But Tigers probably going to have a little bit of revenge on their mind, even thinking back to that. And amazing to think where they are. We talked about this the other day. I mean, they were on the cusp of, at least their media was talking about in the press box of firing Ausmus and blowing things up, so to speak. And they looked so bad, and they've really come on here over the last few weeks, especially one of the hotter teams in the American League. So not going to be easy for the Orioles, but hey, no excuses. You got to go and win some games.
He is Luke Jones. You can find him out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault talking sports with us. And, of course, any of the Ravens sound, the Orioles sound, and always out on Twitter at Baltimore Luke. You can email him anytime, Luke at WNST.net. I'm out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day. You can also download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear from wherever you are. And, of course, on top of that, we'll be monitoring the Orioles and the Ravens out in social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, as well as streaming on Facebook Live and our WNSTV YouTube channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.